on? Do I need to do something with this? All right.
Press the green button and hope the batteries.
Say the pledge and I'll say invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time to review and go over our budget. Give us wisdom and discernment in terms of the decisions that we make as we're going through this process, so that we use these funds wisely and the city of Goddard will continue to prosper. Thank you for this time again. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Ms. Burt, this is your show.
All right.
Take it away.
Well, I feel like after we get through tonight, and if we're able to get through all of this evening, we are on the downhill slide of the budget. So when we meet again on the 22nd, we will be going over the tourism fund, and then just capital improvement, equipment reserve, and some very small funds. So that should be really fairly easy to get through. So tonight we are going to talk about our enterprise and special revenue funds. And just so you remember, these are the funds that are not set by mill levy. The only actual mill dollars that come in here are through transfers from the general fund. So as we're talking about these funds are more like a business. We try to operate that way. I should have mentioned before we got started here, you guys have an updated packet in front of you. The orange papers are the workbook papers for tonight, and then I also provided you with an updated budget calendar as well. I'm very happy to say that you can see we only have a few more check boxes left to do on this budget calendar. So everything's coming along good. I don't see any potential issues. So tonight we're going to talk about the Public Works vehicle and equipment schedule, and I figured that was important to put at the beginning of our presentation because this is a new program that we've put together that flows to all of our funds that will be to this. So we'll go over that first, and then those dollars will be flowing into these funds. We'll talk about the water utility fund and the water reserve fund together, the sewer utility fund and the sewer utility reserve fund together. So in the past, you probably have just seen the utility and then later you saw the reserves, but now we've combined them. The reserve funds are not budgeted funds, but we are budgeting them and using them like we should. But for budget authority, they are not considered budgeted funds. We will talk about our stormwater fund, which is new, newer. Special highway and street fund, our special parks and recreation fund, and then we'll talk about our next agenda. So this was at the beginning of your workbook, and so I wanted to include this. I wanted to show you that I've included on this list the tourism and promotion fund. That is not in this book yet. We didn't get to it, but I actually consider it a special revenue fund because it is funded by tax revenues and money from the general fund, but it'll be up next on our next list. And all of these other funds are the ones we're going over tonight. So if you want to get started, and if you want to follow along in your workbook, if you need to, we'll start covering the Public Works vehicle and equipment schedule, and this will be on pages 2 through 5 of your workbook. So this new schedule that we've created took some planning, took some strategy. We got together specifically, really, I think Craig and Kevin had kind of started this and started putting together a vehicle and large equipment schedule that goes out 10 years. And it has been refined. When Kevin left, we brought in some other Public Works employees, and they really sat down and decided what was needed, what wasn't needed, when we can postpone equipment purchases, what trucks are about to fall apart. We put mileage to it, I mean, we did a lot of analysis on this and tried to come up with the best plan to possibly always have newer equipment for a public works staff to be using. Again, like I said, this goes multiple years, and it gives us kind of a guideline on when we're gonna make these larger capital investments. So the key highlights of the equipment that we are looking at, and you will see on the schedule, and on page 3 of your workbook, you will see kind of the actual detail every year of what's going into this. But we plan to do some lease programs, a dump truck, a 4-year lease starting in 2026 for $31,000. That's kind of an estimate, and that's a 4-year lease that will, once the 4 years is up, we'll probably continuously roll that into a new lease and go on and on. So you will see those dollars going out 10 years. A mini excavator and skid steer loader, that's a 6-year lease starting this year. In fact, I guess I should mention, you wanted me to mention, I believe Jason, sorry, I was going to call Kevin. Jason's going to be bringing to you all some prospective equipment to come to in 2025. So, one-time purchases, milling machine attachment in 2027, we're looking at $16,000. A breaker packer plate, we're going to start purchasing that in 2027 at $1,000. A Rava street sweeper, $150,000, possibly in 2028. We are looking at 2 Exmark mowers for $30,000 in 2028. And then we pushed out purchasing a backhoe of about $135,000 to 2035. And what's kind of interesting about that, we had actually put a backhoe in our 2025 budget to purchase this year, but with turnover and different opinions, we didn't feel like we truly needed that, and that's how we're able to kind of finance some of these projects that we want to do today and get the ball rolling and possibly push that one out of it until we actually feel like we need it. The Vermeer vac truck, we are looking at probably inquiring about a lease on that happening in 2027. I think that's something that's pretty high need. I think we need that pretty badly, and it's going to be an expensive one, but we just haven't gotten the quotes yet in, and we want to push that out to 2027. Any questions on equipment?
I'll just touch on a couple of those larger pieces real quick. Having had a chance to sit down with the guys and kind of talk about some of the issues and why we prioritize them the way we did. And Jason, feel free to chime in on anything you've learned in your first few days here this week. But the Rava, we bought that brand new in 2018. So it's going to be about 10 years old by the time 2028 rolls around. The last year and a half, we've started to have a lot of trouble with it, just different maintenance issues. AC's out of it right now. We had to patch it. We'd have somebody fabricate a patch for it earlier this year, so it was down, most of the spring, which is a time when you really want it. And then on the vac truck specifically, so we bought that Vermeer vac truck probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, from a local firm here, and it's been quite troublesome since we've had it. We just have never really got it to run right. However, the guys still use it almost daily, if not at least multiple times a week, and it assists primarily with water leaks. So if there's a water leak, which we sometimes have plenty of, they're able to use the hydrovac function on that to basically pothole a hole in the ground without damaging any nearby utilities, and to identify and locate those utilities without having to call in a utility locate to 811. So it saves a bunch of time, and it makes a nice clean hole there for them to go work in. So what we're looking at replacing that with, and it would have to be leased because they're horribly expensive, would be what's called a combo truck, which is a hydro and a vac, so it can use hydro to blow a hole in, and then it can suck water out too. And then it has a huge basin in it that collects water, and it can be really convenient. We had one in the community I served prior. We bought it used. It was 20 years old, rebuilt, and it cost $100,000. So I won't tell you what a brand new one costs in 2025. So that one would probably be a lease, and it's something that we would probably have to get even lease a used one, just because they're so expensive, and it would be tough for us to decide on buying a new one as far as that's concerned. So.
Okay, so moving on to vehicles, all of our trucks were assessed and the mileage and kind of what was, at its end of life, and so we factored in several vehicle purchases, 3 new units each at $40,000, phased in across 2026 and 2027. So 2 trucks in 2026 and then another one in 2027. We plan to replace one in 2025. Again, that will be coming to council fairly soon. Utility trucks, we've got a couple there, one in 2027 and one in 2028. And then heavy duty vehicles, those are looking at, going out to 2028, 2029 and on. So a bucket truck, again, that's going to be out there quite a ways in 2029 as well. And then 3 units slated for replacement based on mileage in 2023 and 2034. So, like I said, we've gone out and kind of assessed all of our trucks, which ones need to go, and kind of phased them in over the next 10 years, trying to make sure that, we're not driving them until they're rust buckets that don't have seats, and you know how it goes, and a lot of times in the public work world.
We started switching to these more light duty units, but we're still wanting to keep at least enough heavy trucks in our fleet for our salt spreading and plow operation, because the lighter duty pickups don't do so well with the plow on them, or when they're fully loaded. And when we buy these trucks, they are the cheapest version of that you can get. They're nice new trucks, but we don't do like the automatic windows and all the different stuff like that. It's the stock package, and then we typically outfit it with a top light and a toolbox. So, and on the bucket truck, they decided that they didn't use it enough, so we pushed that one out quite a bit.
So the way we plan to allocate the cost of these equipment and vehicle purchases is we're going to divide it equally amongst the water fund, the sewer fund, and the street fund. And you can see the total cost in the first column of what we're looking at spending each year and how it's going to relate out into the budget into these items. So like I said, this is one of the reasons I wanted to go over this in the beginning, because these numbers flow into the budgets of each one of these funds. So again, Jason's going to be bringing to you probably about $57,000 worth of equipment very soon for 2025, and then in 2026 we're looking at a total of about $128,000, divvied up about $43,000 per fund. The water fund, the sewer fund doesn't have too much trouble absorbing these costs. It's the street fund that we'll see that kind of dips us down a little bit. And in fact, I started to move the bucket truck out just so it would be a little bit less burdensome on these funds to make sure that we're within our reserve. So that pretty much sums up the equipment and vehicle long-term plan. Does anybody have any questions on that? Any comments?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
On 2025 total equipment and vehicle, is that including the vehicle purchase, the pickup, or just the leases?
It is $17,000 worth of equipment and $40,000 worth of vehicles.
Thank you.
Yep. I pass.
You're ready for that.
Okay.
I just want to make a quick comment. I think this is the type of planning. I mean, we're not just talking about the vehicles, but now we can see where the flow of funds are coming from, so that as we're going forward, depending on how revenues flow from year to year, those things in the out years can be adjusted. But this way, I mean, as we get on into this, I mean, the water funds are going to be increasing in terms of amounts, and reserve amounts are increasing. So the overall health of our budget is is really good. And then we're just not guessing like, it's July, maybe we need to spend some money or buy something. And if we're replacing this equipment on a consistent basis, leasing the things, we don't have expense and things breaking down, and it just simplifies things for everyone if everything that they're using to work actually works. When you start talking about buying something that's, since we've had it new, it's been a struggle, that just creates so many additional hardships in terms of actually getting things done. So I just think in terms of the budgeting we're doing this year compared with the way things were done in the past, this is a gigantic leap forward. I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is good stuff.
And another thing that you're gonna see here, there are no transfers from our utility funds and our special revenue funds to equipment reserve funds to fund stuff like this anymore. A lot of times you'll transfer money into the reserve funds and it just gets eaten up by anybody that gets to it first, basically. Or, that anybody can use those funds, any department in the city. To me, this makes more sense that these funds are taking care of their equipment needs within their operating business versus transferring money out to save it for something that you never know if something else becomes more important and takes it away from that bucket of money. So trying to make sure that that's the way we're working things here. Okay, so if we move on to our water utility fund and our water reserve fund, again, like I said, I'm combining these together tonight so we can talk about them because they go hand in hand. Going right into our water utility fund revenue sources, so we have these different types of revenues coming in for our water fund, and most of you already know all this, especially Naomi, since she's on the water committee. But customer sales, that represents obviously our largest share of revenue, and just as a reminder, in 2024, we had our significant rate increase, and then going forward every July, starting this year in 2025, we have that 2% adder to our rates. So that really stimulates enough revenue coming in, and we don't have to go back and address our rates really anytime soon that I can see. And we also have customer growth as well in that. We have tap fees, one-time fees for new connections. We have penalty charges, interest income. Interest is earned every month in this fund based on its fund balance at that point in time, so they're getting a little bit of money that way. Connection fees, and then we have miscellaneous revenue as well. Expense categories, I wanted to explain the way I presented this to you this time. As you recall, in the general fund, I gave you a breakdown of every single line item that we had per department. Can't really do that in this fund because you would have 77 pages of different line items, because what we have here is we have departments within each of these funds. So we actually have an administration, collection, transmission, treatment, processing, transfers, and I actually broke out the salaries and benefits out of admin. So that's why you see admin other here. So we have these different categories. When we decide to change softwares next year, possibly we may change this up a bit, make things just a little bit different, but for now this is what we have. Transfers, debt service payments, contributions to the water reserve fund, and you'll see in a second that we're going to make a payment in 2026 to reimburse the capital improvement fund for expenses that happened this year that we weren't planning on. So those are our categories. This is our statement of revenue and expenses. Treated like a business, I like to show you your total revenues, your total expenses, net income, change in fund balance. So, we always really want to see that our revenues exceed our expenses, so we've got positive net income down here in the bottom. When we have positive net income, that money's rolling back into our fund balance and building those amounts up. Just some trends, let's look at the revenue. So you can see our customer sales in 2023, 2024, how you have that 35.82% increase. That represents the largest increased piece of our rates that we raise, so you can see why that's so high. And also we had extra tap fees and extra tap fee revenue coming in. 2025, I would expect that maybe to go up just a little bit more than that if our tap fees catch back up to what we kind of expect them to be. But overall, it's showing a significant increase into our customer revenue, and then a little bit more customer revenue, based on our rate increases and our growth. So that's where we're showing revenue. Expenses, we've gone up a little bit. We were at 13.21% in 2024, went up a little bit more, 23.95% in 2025, and then just a little bit of an increase in 8.23%. Salaries and benefits, I want you to notice it did go up a little bit in this. This is still based on the reallocation of salaries. A good portion of the salaries went back to the general fund as we talked about last time around. You're going to see a big decrease in the sewer fund's salaries, and then a little bit of an increase back into the street. So it's kind of gone like this based on the reallocation of salaries. So transfers, I want to show you that we're projected to transfer $400,000 in 2025. That 364 has gone down because that's based on a reallocation of debt service payments to what the actual payments are. So that's what that difference is there. All of my expenses, or all of my utilities and such also have a 5% increase as a rider. Everything else was pretty much annualized out to kind of flow with what we expect it to be based on through 6:30 basically almost today, what we expect them to be. So just a little more breakdown on the key highlights of the expenses. Again, like I mentioned to you, the salaries went up just a little bit, 7.48% over 2025. I increased a little bit more expense, some dollars towards the repairs and maintenance of vehicles, because we still have some older fleet in there that we are going to have to account for, and we're always being surprised with those things. So I put some more dollars there. Legal services have gone up substantially for all of the work that we're having to do with our water rights, all of the stuff that Ryan Peck and his team do for us, KDHE, to contracts with rural water, all that stuff has to be reviewed extensively, and it's very time consuming for them. So they have a larger allocation this year to legal fees. You'll see the Public Works Equipment Program listed here. That's our new initiative. You'll see this on every single slide that we talk about with the fund, with these funds, and we've already gone over that. Well service and water tower maintenance contracts. So we have contracts to do these services. Not sure that they were always budgeted for in the past. So I've made sure that they're line itemed out now, and we can see that they're coming in. Sometimes we sign those contracts and then the billing is way late, and they come in and we forget about them, and we won't forget about them anymore because they're there and ready to be paid for. Emergency well repairs, I also made a line item in the operations for about $50,000 for these emergencies that we could possibly have. So anytime we have an emergency, typically we've had to rob the reserve fund, and that fund is really kind of getting where I don't want it any lower. I don't really want to spend anything more out of that. So if we can at least account for something, that will help us cover any sort of surprises. And since we've had so many surprises on those, hopefully they're done surprising us and we think positive and don't worry about it, right? Transfers, again, like I just mentioned, debt service transfers have realigned to match with water project principal and interest schedules. So you will see this one go down, but you're going to see sewer go up because I felt like sewer deserved more of the burden based on what the project was actually financing. Reserve fund contribution, there's $125,000 annual transfer to water reserve fund. That's going to continue. And a $36,000 transfer to capital improvement fund for things that we've had to pay for this year that we like our utilities to operate on their own, and when they have to go borrow money from the general fund or other funds, we want to make sure we can pay those back. That's how we feel. one of the things is that, well, you saw us bring to council the other night was the intent resolution to go out for a large bond, for several projects. And so we put this into our picture, and financing these things has really helped postpone some costs down the road, help build up our reserve fund, our water fund, because it was depleted. So being able to cover these costs and push them down the road to 28, 29 and get a whole bunch done has been really beneficial to the fund balance in the water fund. These are the projects we plan to finance, which you guys saw the other night. We'll do 10 water looping projects, 4, these will come back for, I need to mention, they'll come back for a vote and you'll get to decide again, but this is what we're planning for within our budget. 4 water main projects, which is a part of our 5 and 5 partner, 12 hydrants, valve replacements. There's a fencing project that was mentioned for about $42,000 that is needed around some wells for security that they need updated. So we put that in there. There's an AMI project in that bucket of bond too, and then water part inventory for in-house water main replacement. I know that some of these projects are gonna, depending on how much money we truly want to borrow at the end of the day, some of these projects may be completely done or partially done or kind of a mix of the such. So when we fine tune that, we'll bring that back to you. But right now, dollars aren't really affecting the fund balance right now with this because this is stuff that's going to be financed down the road. Shared capital facility investment. So this is our public works facility. We're estimating that to be 4.5 million or less, hopefully.
Any rate less than 5.
Anything less than 5. The water fund will take 25% of that burden. So I've estimated that, out of this, the water fund, the sewer fund, and the street fund will all take the burden of this project. So, I have a note in here, I'll probably mention.
While you're looking, a couple things when Brooke, we were talking the last few days, the actual revenue on our water fund is pretty much on budget this year, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think that's important to note because you were kind of conservative in those projections and we've had so much rain, the amount of yard watering probably hasn't been as great. So I think that's an important thing to point out that because of the increase in rates, those revenue projections are on track year to date. The other thing is that those water looping projects were identified through a study that was done. Trans Systems, we've done so many PECs, kind of remember who did what study, but in order for us to maintain water pressure as we continue to grow as a city, having those lines in place is really an important part of keeping water pressure for everybody. So when you turn the faucet on, we actually have water. So, I mean, there's a connection I just want to point out between the money we spent in the last year or so on studies and the information that we've gained. That's flows into this budget process. The decisions that we're making are based on good data, and so we've got forward-looking data. We know we're growing, and these are things without those studies we'd be totally unaware of. So I really appreciate all the work the staff has done and put into all this. But you can kind of see all these puzzle pieces kind of fitting together now, and I think it's important that people in the community know that there's been a lot of hard work done to identify these things, and the numbers, depending on how we step through this. I mean, that 6 million is if we just took one big swing. There might be a possibility of stepping this over a year or two. So, I mean, those are the ongoing discussions, but I think it's important to understand that if we look at the things, these are the needs that we have, and with the revenue projections, the fact that we're growing, there's money available to do all of this. I mean, so that, I mean, it's the marrying of the projections, the revenue side, and all these expenses that we're looking at I don't want anybody in the community to get concerned. I had somebody the other day just say, you know, just even your number on that building, the Public Works building, those are big numbers we're talking about. But I just want to assure everyone that we're well aware that they're big numbers, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that our money's spent wisely, and we don't cheat ourselves either. I think May's put in a new Public Works facility 3 or 4 years ago, similar size to what we're looking at, and they're already possibly talking about spending another $1 million to expand it. So we don't want to, you know, maybe shortchange ourselves, but if there's a way, possibly if the things are done, that we're looking ahead, that maybe there's steps to do those things. So going forward, we can grow into these facilities without a lot of extra effort. So I think we're on the right track and all that. But these things it's just kind of neat right now for me at least to look back on all the work we've done and see all this coming together in our budget, and so time well spent.
One of the pieces that might be getting missed in all this, the new stuff here, is that, you know, we're even making quite a bit of an investment in replacing the stuff that was put in the ground in the 40s and 50s before any of us were even alive yet. And so when you look at the
Some of us were alive.
You're
57, brother.
Okay.
40s and 50s. Yeah.
1940s. We've got about a $600,000 balance between that $6 million and where we're at on estimating projects for the water looping and distribution improvements. And so one of the things that Jason and I and the other Public Works staff are trying to work through is, do we want to do some additional replacement of some of that 70-year-old main in Old Town while we have an appetite to pay for these things? Or do we want to leave that $600,000 balance for something later? Do we want to do a combination of some more mains and some of our advanced metering infrastructure? So we'll have another month or two to kind of come to you guys and say, okay, this is the final plan that we'd like to put forth for that part of the bond. So.
And just an estimation, I mean, if we were to go out for a $7.1 million bond issuance on this, 20 years, 5%, I think it's about $700,000 as a payment. So kind of keeping that in mind when I'm doing my fund balance projections and what we're trying to build at the end of the 10th note timeline to be able to start servicing debt on these projects. So if we move on to the fund balance forecast and assumptions, so just as a reminder, we try to keep everything above 25% in our reserves, and we're doing fine with that. In fact, we've got plenty of money in our reserves, but I have factored in a 5% annual increase. That comprises of about that 2% increase overall on the rates that we're getting, with about a 3% customer growth, and that's pretty conservative. So I feel like we're not overshooting here. Expense projection, I just went ahead and rolled everything up at a 5% increase to reflect inflation and any type of systems needs. Budgeted right now in 2026, $364,000 for debt service payments and other things, but trying to bump it up in 2027 to about $500,000. I'm going to adjust that transfer amount to make sure we're transferring as much as we can over what we earn and our earnings, to try to keep our reserves where we need them to be, but put anything extra into our reserve fund and really build that fund balance up. Yes, and I believe we're going to, typically what we're doing right now is we're doing $125,000 annually to the reserve fund. I think we can get that number to $260 by the time probably next year, or maybe even more. So that's a goal, to try to be dumping over into that project. And this is what we'd be looking at. You can see some history here in 2023. That was our $589,000 was our ending fund balance. And if we do this projection, our reserves are way over our 25%. So that kind of leaves us some leeway if something did go awry and something burned down. I don't know, big trouble. We've got some extra leeway there. But we're building up a fund balance here in our operations, with plenty to live off of, and still being able to transfer over into the reserve fund, which we're wanting to build up.
That'll allow us too to potentially buy down some of that debt before we go to permanent finance in 28, 29 to make sure those annual debt payments are manageable. But looking at our year-to-date residential in-city water sales, which I sent to council about an hour ago, it looks pretty good that we'll be able to cover that debt service when the time comes.
Start for the chart. Micah, you said you like the charts, so look at that. Okay.
He's on the second crumble cake.
That is a cake. I know.
It's all together, it's one.
Big pie.
Wow.
All right, so meshing right on into the water utility reserve fund. I'm not going to get too deep into this because it really isn't going to get too deep into. We do have some revenue sources that come into this fund other than transfers. We have the equity fees that we get off of new developments. Some interest income, as I explained earlier, on how that's earned. So it's projected to have about $210,000, 2025 and 2026 coming in. And again, like I said, in 2027, that 125 should shoot up to about 260. So we'll be able to really start steamrolling and making some headway in this fund. Expenses, we have about $90,000 estimated for the water 5 and 5 program this year, which you guys have already approved, and we've almost spent it all, so that project's almost over with. But we had to pull it out of this fund. We didn't have the room in the operations budget, the fund we just saw, so we pulled it out of here. You'll see I put 0 here. I don't plan to spend anything in this fund going forward because we plan to do all this financing of all the projects. So we should be pretty tied up with projects. The only thing would be an emergency, and we'd have to just kind of determine how we wanted to handle that if it's over and beyond our $50,000 emergency plan, a fund line in the regular fund. So with that being said, this is kind of my forecast. Steady equity fees and interest, we plan to keep getting that. Our transfers, as I've already discussed, and obviously I just mentioned, no expenditures budgeted for 2026 through 2029 right now. So if we do that, our fund balance really grows, and this is beautiful, I think. So you put these dollars with your other dollars that you have in your other fund, and you've got pretty good cash on hand. So I don't want citizens to see this and think we're just hoarding cash. This will go down when we have debt service to pay that's coming online. So I think at the end of the day, and we have our projects done and we're trying to finance, we'll have to really make a decision at that point in time. If we want to refinance some debt, if we want to, what kind of terms do we want to do, how we feel like structuring the payments at that point in time, if there's any other big projects we decide to do as well. Just agreeing, okay. So again, this is our reserve fund. So pretty. Dollars accumulating. So here, I'll move on. Okay. Micah, chart. Okay. Thank you, Micah, interested.
We should be awake. He's the much sugar he's taking in right now. He should be kicking in pretty quick.
Alright, so I think that pretty much wraps up. Got any questions on the water fund? Kind of what we see into the future, how we plan to manage it? Anything?
I just want to take a quick second to thank the council because some unpopular decisions that were made previously have made it so we can protect the health and welfare of our community for years to come. So thank you. And thanks, Brooke, for putting it all together. Looks great.
Alright, sewer utility fund. So we have revenues here. We'll just these are our sources. We obviously have a residential and commercial, just residential sewer charges. We don't have outside. We have commercial too. I should have wrote commercial there. Sorry. Tap fees, interest income, and penalties. So those are pretty much our revenue streams. Expense categories, again, this is kind of the same way I had to set it up for the water fund. We have an administrative department, collection and transmission, treatment and processing, and I broke out the salaries and benefits out of administration just so we can see those on the books here. So, statement of revenues and expenses. This is kind of our history of our revenues, expenses, and net income. This one kind of fluctuates a little bit, and it's kind of dependent upon the transfers out and the things that, some of the expenses that ended up occurring that we're planning on. Total revenues, you know, it's gone up due to growth, and I think there was a small charge, a small increase to the rates. I think a sewer charge wasn't there when I first started.
That was before us.
Was it before us? Okay. Well,
When they restructured the debt service fee, I think they tweaked that.
okay. Then it's the tap fees. I forget the tap fees. Those have gone up, but again, they kind of declined a little bit in 2025 right now. But I expect those to pick back up and probably make us positive there. Budgeted conservatively for tap fees in 2026. So again, I don't want to overestimate anything. I'd rather be under than over estimations for that. So operating expenses, again, I mentioned to you that you would see a decrease in salaries and benefits in this fund because it was carrying some of the brunt of the allocations last time around. Transfers, they are going down just as a reallocation of different things. I don't remember why. Sorry. Why those are going down. Well, I think I've got those covered in here. So overall, our net income in 2026 is back negative. I'm hoping that our projection ends up being a little bit better than a negative 177, but we have enough fund balance in that fund to absorb that. It's not bringing us below any sort of threshold, but typically I'm going to want to see when I'm doing my budgeting those being in the black every year. So salaries and benefits, just a rundown of some of the major changes in the expenses. Salaries went down 16.35% from 2025 due to the reallocation of salaries. Public Works, we did plan to hire another person, I believe, in that department. So that does all of these funds will take a piece of that salary increase on that piece. Insurance and bonds, we redid our insurance policies, as you recall, and so we are getting some relief in this fund by the savings that we took from that new policy. This fund's getting its allocation of the Public Works Equipment Program. Plant and generator maintenance contracts, this is kind of the same story as water. We have annual contracts as well for this service, and I'm making sure that they're accounted for in the budget and they're not a surprise later on when they come in. Manhole repairs, we increased this by 10,000. Just talking to Public Works staff, these were some things that they thought needed to be done. Debt service transfers, they rise. That was the reallocation of debt service that we mentioned. And transfers to sewer reserve, 200,000 set aside in 2026 to keep adding to that reserve balance. And if at any time we can increase those transfers, and I see that we can do that, we'll do that to put money over there. Fund balance forecasts and assumptions. I project that our revenues will probably increase about 3%. Expense projections about 5%. So we're going to want to watch that ratio. It's really not that bad. It'll take a long time to meet and cause trouble, but we want to watch that. And I bet our revenue projections may even be better than that. They may be equal. Transfers right now are budgeted at 589, adjusted to maintain the 25% reserve compliance, with approximately 200,000 directed to the sewer utility fund.
You know, Brooke, one of the things maybe we ought to consider, maybe if not this year, next year, is also having a 2% increase on the charges for the sewer charges. I mean, the inflation and everything impacts that side of things as just like it does the water. And that way maybe would help keep these numbers a little more in line. And as we get into the out years, at some point in time, I know that facility's expandable. Depends how fast we grow, when we have to expand it or when we do. But that might be something too, just so that we kind of keep up with the rate of inflation, so we're not coming back in 5 or 6 years and hitting everybody with a big increase because we just neglected doing what we've done with the water. So.
I believe that some of the transfers we were doing in the past, also that's why these are a little bit different going forward, is because we were transferring to the capital improvement fund and to the equipment reserve fund. And again, I've eliminated the transfer to equipment reserve, and I truly don't anticipate using the capital improvement fund to fund these sorts of projects going forward. So there's no reason to put money over there because it has its own fund for these projects. Sewer utility fund forecast, again, we're way ahead on our reserve percentages above 25%. So we could probably start, this is what I'm saying, we could probably start transferring excess money over there. I just want to keep our, I don't like to see a negative net income, so I don't want to, I mean, it's here and we can use it, but I don't like to see negative net income, but we can if we need to. It's a beautiful balance too. Okay, so moving on to the sewer utility reserve fund, and this is where you're going to see some action, unlike the water fund, because we're not financing these projects. These are actually going to be paid for out of the sewer reserve fund. So, like I mentioned, we have some revenue coming in. We have equity fees coming into this fund, interest income coming into this fund as well, and transfers from the sewer fund. So there's our $200,000 transfer. Stays pretty steady going across the board there. In 2025, we've got some projects that we plan to do. Some of them have come to council, some of them haven't yet, but you'll be seeing those. The blower motor repairs we've already brought to council. The 5 and 5 partner project's already been brought to council. The catwalk has come to council, but the TSS probe, some bay improvements have not, so those will probably be coming to council soon. And I've also budgeted for an emergency expense line in this budget too, so we can hopefully manage that. In 2026, we have our 5 and 5 partner, so our CIP said that we wanted to spend around $100,000, so we budgeted that there. We have a generator backup project. That's probably going to be really, we don't know if that's going to go very far. I think you and I talked about that, but that at least puts something there to start with. A pump project for $25,000, compressor upgrades for $14,000, a screen upgrades, I believe, at the ponds or over there for $50,000, and then I put an emergency expense line item in there for $100,000 just to be on the safe side, making sure that all of those numbers and all those projects stay within what we hopefully within our fund balance. Oh, I guess. Already talked about this stuff. So, in addition to all these capital projects we plan to do there, we'll need to start considering doing our piece of the public works facility too. So, like water had their 25%, sewer's going to have 50% of that burden. So, again, this is not going to have a cash flow balance situation where it's going to affect any cash today, but we need to put it on here so we don't forget about it and have to start financing that. So with that being said, with our revenues coming in, this is the sewer utility reserve fund balance forecast, and we're still transferring in our $200,000. We're doing our capital projects out of here. We're staying way above our reserve percentage. At the end of 2029, we'll have about a little over $1 million, hopefully, in that fund. something that we need to also remember is we've already financed the SCADA project. So that one will probably be coming online in 2028, and the water and sewer will need to start funding that debt as well. So I probably should have mentioned that early on, but that's another debt payment that will probably start taking pieces of this out. So, any questions on sewer?
Y'all are really quiet this evening. Around the table here. Any comments? Thought we'd maybe just give Brooke a chance to breathe here, so.
Not till September 2nd. We adopt the budget.
I understand, but I thought here just for five seconds, we could let you catch your breath. You guys are good? All right.
Okay. We'll move right along, stormwater fund. So as a reminder, this is our newest fund, or one of our newest fund, or our newest utility sort of fund. It started late last year, about November, so it doesn't have a lot of history, but it has the plan in place for what we want to do with it. So it does have some revenues. It has stormwater fee for residential and commercial customers. It gets some building permit, stormwater fee for building permits, and again, it earns its piece of the pie of the interest income. Not any activity in 2023, very little in 2024, because again, this started in November, so we started having expenses and we didn't have anything budgeted for, so we can't, this is a budgeted fund, so we can't spend any money in it if we didn't have anything budgeted. So we just let it build, and knowing that in 2025 we'd start spending some money on some projects. So you can see we're projected right now to have about $125,000 worth of revenue in this fund, hopefully this year, and it goes up just a little bit next year. And with those funds, we kind of determine the projects we want to do and keep our fund balance at a certain level, and just kind of build this up and use it as it's needed to do stormwater projects. There's a line item on here for capital projects, so I want to step back a second. We have a total budget authority in 2025 of $80,000. If we spent exactly $80,000, we kind of back into the numbers that we want to spend. So speaking with staff, it was determined that we should allocate money every year for ditch maintenance to make sure we're taking care of all the ditches, camera work, and mapping and GIS. Those are things that need to happen within our sewer system, so we put dollars in the bucket so we can do those projects continuously, annually. Anything left that we have, we set to the side and do a capital project that may be something more expensive. We don't really have them identified yet. It's kind of they might be an emergency project on a ditch situation, I don't know. So we don't have to spend this money, but it's set there in case it arises. But it allows us to make some stormwater improvements as we go forward. And you can see across the bottom there, we have positive net income every year, so that's pretty too, seeing positive net income. This slide just kind of shows just some narrative behind what those things were. Again, like I said, we met with staff, Public Works, and they determined the needs of kind of put some dollars to these things, because these are things that we need to do, and we haven't had the opportunities to do those in the past. Fund balance forecast, revenue projections are set at 3, expense projections set at 5%, so that kind of flushes out with this scenario, which shows that we're way over our reserve percentage of 25%, and we're just building up, doing projects as needed, maintaining our fund balance, and I'm sure at some point there'll be something big that comes our way that we'll be set for and ready for.
And we don't even have a good majority of our stormwater system mapped, and so there's a lot of underground stormwater, especially south of 54. Today we got into some that we didn't even know existed, and my previous experience in a community that has older parts of town is that those concrete underground systems, they fail, and they may fail, you didn't even know it until you get a big rain event, and then a place that didn't have water standing out before now does, and doing a repair like that gets really, really pricey. So, well, we haven't quite found all the pain points yet as we start mapping our system, which we are mapping a percentage of it a year so we can start getting all that data geolocated. Then we'll kind of be able to spot the pain points ahead before they fully break down. But I anticipate a lot of that work will be happening in Old Town over the next few years. So.
Kind of broke our mind that we didn't have the maps already.
So there wasn't a lot of, it's not unique for a community of our size. Everything that's come online within the last, 5 to 10 years is mapped, but before that, there was really no geolocating at all. So cities of our size are really kind of catching up to that technology. As we have time, we have folks that are going out to gather points, and we're getting into the system. But we want our guys to be able to hold a tablet that has a map on it, and then they can literally stand right over the top of a water valve or whatever it is that they're looking for.
So I will say, to Craig's point, is that you guys are actually further ahead of the game than where I came from. We were still using paper maps where I came from. So yeah, you guys are, it's really kind of impressive when I came here to see how far ahead you are, but there's still lots to do.
It's basically everything south of 54 exclusive of the new developments, but we are getting a portion of that mapped every year. Mike is a GIS technician, so thankfully he's helped us kind of get going a little bit.
Okay, so that's Stormwater. Any questions on Stormwater? We're making great time. You're efficient. Alright. Special Highway Street Fund. This is the interesting one. Very interesting one. This one is one that gave me heartburn. I was really worried about this fund. As I was looking at its trends over time, we're going negative every year. And I was telling Craig, I've cut, I don't know how to make it work. So the work was we had to increase our transfers from the general fund. So we talked about that, how we had some architectural costs budgeted for in our general fund for 2026. We're going to be reimbursed those funds with temp note proceeds. Therefore, we're going to use those funds to increase our transfers to the street and special highway fund. So I have to think about this fund like it's almost the general fund in my opinion. I mean, it gets very little revenue from some state tax gas and things like that, and then we're trying to do $2 million worth of work out of that fund. So it's basically you're getting all the money from the general fund. So I'm okay with that scenario now that I've wrapped my head around it, and I had to make some adjustments to get us back up to where we're not bleeding and understand that the mill and the sales tax that we have are going to have to carry the needs that we have over there. We don't only have street repairs and maintenance and the 5 and 5, we've got salaries and benefits and all of the things that all the other funds have too. So that you have to think about this fund just a little bit differently than the utility funds, but it's still a special revenue fund, a segment of the general fund in my opinion, if you want to kind of think about it that way. Like I mentioned, we do have some revenue sources. We have the state gas tax, county gas tax, and interest income, the community impact fee, some miscellaneous revenues, and then the transfer is our largest in from the general fund. State and county gas tax has really remained flat. These numbers are given to us from the county or from the state, so I just plug them right in. Usually they're right there, but they don't really change a whole lot. You would think they would, but they don't. Maybe Craig.
Yeah, so I think it's a formula that has to do with the mill levy actually, that determines how much these amounts are. It's similar to like with the library where they get the oil and the special highway tax and stuff as a source of revenue through to there.
Interest income, if, you know, we get a little bit from that. Community impact fee, that was new, that we established, I think, late last year, and so, we're projected to receive that money again. A little bit of miscellaneous revenue, and then the transfers in from the general fund. So you'll see 700,000 in 2025. That's what we budget for. I'm going to explain this in a minute, but we're going to budget 1.9 in 2026. The reason that looks so funny is because if you've heard me say, I think I've mentioned it before, paying for the 2025 streets 5 and 5 programs come from several funds. There was the 700,000 transfers into the street fund. That was to kind of handle the operations and maintenance and the whatever to help subsidize. And then we make a $972,000 transfer from the general fund to the capital improvement fund to do the piece of the 5 and 5 program. And then the remainder of those dollars come out of the general fund. So that's a mess, right? It's this fund, that fund, and this fund. That's the way we're having to make it work. So instead of that, I want to transfer it all here and let's just handle it here. Right?
So in essence, what you're saying is that the actual transfers for 2025 were close to that $1.9 million. It just came from different directions.
They came from different places, correct. I kind of feel like if we move it over here, we can keep better track of it, and if we spend less or more, it's still here for streets. If it goes to the capital improvement fund, it kind of gets lost over there. I mean, we know what we spend in it, but there really isn't a transfer out of the capital improvement fund back to somewhere or if we run out, you know, we spent too much money, now what are we going to do? We're going to have to eat up fund balance, and it's coming out of the fund that makes the most sense for it to come out of. So this is just a little more organized, trying to get those pieces together. Does that make sense to everybody? Our expense categories, we have the administration, street operations, there's a stormwater department here, street lightings and signals, mosquito control, and transfers. Stormwater has been completely removed out of this fund going forward because now it's handled in the stormwater fund, so we don't have to do that anymore. So you'll see some change there. We no longer do mosquito control, so, but it's a department, so it's.
That was a bad decision, by the way.
I've been hearing quite a bit about it. Well, it's zero, so there's no money towards it.
I think we're okay until we see a mosquito carry a child across the border.
Flew off with it.
Brooke, could you click back to the slide that had the community impact fee?
Yes.
I just wanted to highlight that real quick. We had a call from our citizens about just wanting to see if the development community could maybe pick up more of the tab for some of the services and stuff in the community. And so we had passed this community impact fee, and each time they pull a building permit, they pay the fee, and half of it goes to rebuilding streets in our community, and the other half goes towards our park system.
Great. Okay, so if we cover our expenses, go over our expenses, we have our salary and benefit, which was up just a little bit, our administration, that's where all of our capital outlay comes out of. I know it's kind of funny to put it there, but that's where it goes. This fund doesn't have a reserve fund, so typically you handle your big capital stuff out of the reserve fund, but it's handled in administration, so that 1.3 is really all the funds that we're going to spend for street repairs and 5 and 5. Street operations, stormwater, like I said, it's zeroing out because those dollars and expenses are now being covered over in the stormwater fund. Street lighting and signals, mosquito control is 0, and transfers out, that was a transfer that would go to equipment reserve again. I had to make some cuts, and so that was one of them. We're not going to transfer out, and plus this fund is also taking a piece of the equipment program that we put in place. highlight here, the salaries went up 5.81%, just a little bit to absorb some of the reallocation. Like I just mentioned, this fund also has a piece of the Public Works Equipment Program. Utilities are budgeted at 5% inflation, as of all the funds are. All funds have 5% inflationary growth in utilities. Capital outlay, $1.25 million dedicated to the annual street maintenance and the 5 street program. It's going to be really important that we stick to that dollar amount. We spent a lot this year, a little bit over what we planned for, and those dollars had to come out of the general fund, out of the capital outlay discretionary line item that we talk about. So with this fund being too close to the edge and actually it's going to go under, you're going to see it in a minute, we really can't afford to have emergencies or get excited because if we get another $500,000 worth of benefit out of keep going down the road, I don't know, but we've got to figure out how to say no to something to kind of keep this from going off the cliff, because this was a hard one. I mean, I think you'd have to increase the mill even more. I mean, if you want to keep, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying to cover the cost of this fund. It's a very expensive fund.
And I think we've talked about that in the last couple of meetings, that instead of going through the year as we have in the past and doing specific things, we're deciding now what those things are. So the things that maybe occur as we're going through next year get put on the list to go in the budget process to be financed in the following year. I think it's just a matter, it's not so much, it's really just kind of a disciplined process in terms of how we're spending our funds, and we're just being a little more systematic in terms of the process. So the things that, as things come up that need to get done, we just need to understand that it flows into the process of the next budget, as opposed to deciding, on a Monday night to go ahead and spend money that we could maybe hold on, for 6 months.
It's a tough decision that y'all are in when it comes down to, do we keep going and get more bang for our buck here, but we have to remember, it's hard, so I get it.
So if you want mosquito spraying back in 2026, you gotta decide in the next few weeks. This is part of that.
I'll start thinking.
The sprayer is only 2.5, 3 years old, so just saying.
I'm not sure, I'm not positive, I think I got malaria. Could be cold.
It's getting cold.
Sure it's
Are you that
mosquitoes.
sweet? Alright, our major capital projects, again, the 5 and 5, $1 million for the 5 and 5 program we're voting for, and then planning for the future of our public works facility, and this fund will take on 25% of that burden, so we only think that's fair, right? Okay. Special Highway Fund forecasts and assumptions. This is really tough. Revenues need to increase by 2% every year, and expenses need to be 2% or less. I mean, that's kind of the way we've got it working out. And I kind of did a calculation here, get to it. So if we increase our transfers to the general fund, that'd be about another $38,000 to keep that in line. Or we would, 2% of 1.9 ended up being about $38,000. So if our revenues don't increase to accommodate that, and we want to continue this, we're going to have to juggle that. So we'll be watching these two metrics really closely. No transfers out. I mean, this fund doesn't have the ability to transfer out since we're doing such high costly things out of it. We're going to go below our comfort zone in 2026 and 2027. And I've tried to reduce things out of this, but man, it's pretty bare bones. I mean, what they need is what they need to operate. There isn't anything exciting other than streets in here. I mean, you were able to cut out of here. So With that being said, we have to agree that we're comfortable going below our policy. This is below our policy, but knowing that we're gonna try to make sure our expenses don't go up more than our revenue goes up, so we can start rebuilding that back up. Fund balance in 2029, if we do the 2 and 2, this is where we'll be, there. In 2029, we'll be back up to where we need to be. So, you know, we're doing capital projects, we're eating up fund balance, but if we had continued to not transfer the money in that needed to be made in from the general fund, this wouldn't have worked. I mean, $300,000, you see how fast that would have drained that down. I mean, we increased it from 1.7 to, well, I guess $200,000 or so. That would have been negative. So.
Or at the very, very latest, our STAR bond has to be paid off by 2034. So it's a near-term problem. You know, when that sales tax is unlocked there,
Right.
we would anticipate that a good amount of that would fund some street stuff. So it's important to know. And at the earliest, everything else stays the same. It could mature sometime in early 2028.
So we'll be taking, I think next year, we'll really be looking at this again, kind of seeing where we are and trying to be conservative in this fund and making sure that, like I said, when I say we gotta do $1 million, we need to do $1 million for the street stuff, so. Okay, any questions on the streets? Like I said, it was the one that I thought, I'm gonna go in and finish the street budget today. I'm just gonna get it done. And I went, I'm like, I can't do it. I can't make it work. So, I think I messaged Craig probably in the middle of the night or something. I don't know. Help! What are we gonna do? So,
It worked out.
it was easy. Just take more money from the general fund, put it over there and make it work. So that's the way we had to do that. And again, I think that that's a reasonable way to do it because sales tax comes into that fund, mill levy money comes into that fund that's dedicated for streets. So it's not like it's going to some other fund that would expect to do street repair. So.
When in 2027 at the earliest, it could be another year after that. But I would like to work with Brooke on actually separating out the amount of mills that goes into street for all the operating and the projects itself. In the community I served prior, like that's how we had it. Street was its own standalone thing. It wasn't funded through transfers that came out of the general fund. The mill levy dollars and the sales tax dollars flowed straight to it, and it was just cleaner, easier to budget. But one of the reasons we felt comfortable with making up the difference with general fund balance was because of the relationship that the street fund currently has with the general fund. So.
And we've done fine to keep the general fund balance where we want it to be. I mean, we haven't had to take extra, and with different mechanisms of moving money to different places, we're able to keep our balances where we want them to be, and with projects, so. All right, our last one for the night, Special Parks and Recreation Fund. This one will go pretty quick, because this is, I want to talk to you about the purpose of this fund, because it's kind of different, because you had a fund already in the general fund, the Parks and Recreation Fund in the general fund, and then we have this own fund that has its own separate place. So as you recall, the money that's sitting in the general fund is used for kind of maintenance, operations of our park systems, community buildings, any type of mowing. And then we kind of budgeted for some very small projects to do some small playground equipment and things like that. This fund is more dedicated for large projects. So I actually visited with Matt about this fund not too long ago, and I think he said he'd put money over here and build it up, and then you can do something with it. So that was kind of the mechanism behind that. Our plan, we had decided we're going to have some transfers in. If you recall, we transfer in from the general fund into this fund. And we actually reduced that down in our 2026 budget from 50,000 back down to 25,000, kind of cut some costs and keep our balances good there. But what we want to do today and forward is, just keep transferring into this fund. I should mention, we do have our interest income and the community impact fee that Craig just mentioned for parks. So these dollars are coming into this fund, a little bit from the general fund, and then I don't have anything planned in this fund. I think we're just going to 2026 just keep doing that process over and over again till we build it up, and then when North Park starts having expenses, or if we do incur expenses with North Park that I don't anticipate paying out of this piece, we could pay them out here, but at the end of the day, when we go to permanent financing, we may use some of these dollars to help with the bond payments and such. So the $150,000 that we have here in 2025 are just a myriad of some things that are catched up from 2024 that we paid for Linear Park, playground equipment, trail connectors, the bridge. Some of those costs are actually coming in and flowing through our budget cycle this time, so that's kind of what we're expecting there. But again, like I said, we don't have anything planned in this fund. If we continue to do that and just keep putting our money into here, our fund balance will grow hopefully by 2029 into $816,000, and then we can decide if that will help support, if we want to use some of those dollars to offset the bond payments, if we want to do a different project, or it'll just be sitting there in our park reserve. But I think since we're focusing so hard on North Park and just a few little park things in the general fund, I don't anticipate any major projects park related otherwise, unless I'm told otherwise. So
There'll be some projects that come up, the port in place stuff, that you have to rejuvenate that every few years. You may have some equipment that breaks or something like that, but we don't anticipate anything.
Well, and the majority of this revenue is coming from those tap fees, and so depending on the growth, if the growth continues on the same pace we are, those funds there might be a little more money there, but if we hit a period of time when that slows down, the revenue growth in this will slow down as well. So I think it actually is not a bad place to have this money, that kind of building back really as a reserve fund almost. So,
Well, North Park too is, a 3, 4, 5 phase park, $13-14 million over however many years you want to do it. By the time you get to 2029 or 2030, you may be ready to crack open another phase on that park, whether it's the amphitheater and the boathouse or whatever else comes along for it. And you'll have some money there to do it.
any questions on parks?
Great job, thank you.
Alright, so next discussion. So next time we meet, we're going to talk about the Tourism and Promotion Fund, Capital Improvement Fund, and Equipment Reserve Fund, and then there's like 3 little CIDs that I'll just mention. There's nothing to really talk about in those. Meeting dates, our next meeting, our budget workshop is July 22nd, which will cover that stuff. And then at that point in time, I think you can tell me whether or not you need any other meetings to get together and do anything. But if we don't, then what my plan is to prep all of this together into a presentation, not this lengthy and this detailed. I don't want to bore the public. But I'm going to, condense it down, kind of show them what we've decided. If you have any changes to make, we need to make those. And then in that presentation, we'll have our public engagement event on August 13th. And do the full 2026 budget overview.
Your July 22nd meeting, that's a noon meeting, correct?
Yes,
Okay, you have it up there at 6, but I think in our books here it's noon. So.
it is noon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's just our regularly scheduled 4th Tuesday council meeting. So we'll have council meetings back to back Monday the 21st at 7 p.m. and then Tuesday, July 22nd at noon, and that'll be the budget workshop one. Correct. That's not right. You should have it on your
I'll fix
city
it.
email calendar.
I know, I just went through and put it all on my calendar, so I.
Sorry. Sorry, I'll send an update on that, yeah. And then after that, if there's any changes after the community engagement event and you all want to change something, you've got a different idea, that'll be the time we'll get together, determine if we need to have another meeting or if we'll just wrap this up and get it ready for the presentation and budget hearings on September 2nd. So that's kind of the game plan. So we have some room in there to make some changes, some time, some community engagement. Ways to go. So anything else? Anything else you want?
Everybody good? Any closing comments, either side of the table?
Awesome as always.
All right, I'll make a motion that we adjourn. We'll second it. Now we jumps on the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.